What is up, guys? Eric here from Real Film Reviews, bringing you another Netflix recommendation video for June of 2018. In these videos, I like to pick some movies that are on their way to Netflix for the upcoming month, along with some that have already been on the service recently, and just kind of recommend some really solid films that you can spend your time watching. Now that it's summer, not everyone likes to go outside and spend all day in 100-degree weather, so these are some movies that you can spend your time watching with some friends and some family, or if you just want a good movie to watch on your own. Now, the first movie that I'm going to recommend is probably the one that I'm going to get the most shit for putting on this list, and it's National Treasure. I know a lot of people think of Nicolas Cage as sort of just like this giant joke at this point, which is sort of disappointing because he is genuinely a very talented actor. And this movie came out when I was a kid. I have seen it since I was a kid, and I genuinely do think that this is a fun adventure movie that teaches kids something about history, because I love history, and I feel like this movie's way of telling it makes it interesting for anyone, even if you don't have much of an interest in it. I realize the plot's a little cliche, the whole let's steal the Declaration of Independence because there's a treasure map on the back of it, but it's supposed to be kind of fun and silly while it's also sort of teaching you about different things from history. I think Nicolas Cage is good. I enjoy Sean Bean. I honestly think that this movie is something where people want to hate it just because Nicolas Cage is in it, but in reality, the man still makes a good movie every now and again, and I feel like it's unfair to just judge everything as just, oh, it's a Nicolas Cage movie, write it off. Because this is a solid movie, and I think if you enjoy history, or if you have kids and you want to show them a movie that can teach them something about history, this is a really good one to pick. And then obviously, with all that said, National Treasure definitely does also incorporate a lot of weird conspiracy theory things and fake things from history, but there is real history strewn in throughout the story, which I think is what's important. The next film on my list is Martin Scorsese's The Departed, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Jack Nicholson, Matt Damon, Mark Wahlberg, Alec Baldwin. All kinds of people are in this movie. It has a massive cast. It has an absolutely amazing story that intertwines all of these different characters that are all in different walks of life, and I absolutely adore that about this film. The storytelling is fantastic. You get absolutely phenomenal performances from Jack Nicholson, Leonardo DiCaprio, Mark Wahlberg, and I think that this movie is a testament to how great a sort of crime thriller can be, because we definitely get a lot of lackluster crime thrillers, but I think this one sort of sets the bar very high for how good one can actually be. The film tells the story of a mob boss, a rat in the police department, and an undercover cop that is currently involved with the mob. This film has these three pillars to tell its story, and based on these three pillars, it tells an absolutely enthralling story of deception, betrayal, and all kinds of other different things. It has love, it has action, it has everything that you want out of a truly great movie, and if you've never seen The Departed and you like films like The Godfather or Goodfellas, definitely watch it. The next film is one that actually is a pretty recent release, and that is Thor Ragnarok, the third Thor film in the Marvel Universe, and arguably one of the best movies in all of the Marvel Universe. This movie is 100% in my top 5 favorite Marvel movies. I think this movie is amazing. Taika Waititi directed the film. He's most well known for What We Do in the Shadows, probably. The film stars Chris Hemsworth, Tom Hiddleston, and Jeff Goldblum in sort of the three most important roles. You know, two are obviously returning stars. Jeff Goldblum plays this guy named the Grandmaster, who's absolutely hilarious. And that's the thing about this film, is it's very quirky and weird, like Waititi is as a person, and it makes this film flourish where the other two Thor movies kind of just fell flat. This movie has amazing action, a great story, and it's so funny. Like, it is easily the funniest movie in the entire Marvel Universe, and I understand that I'm putting that against some pretty funny movies, but this one takes the cake by a long shot. It is absolutely hilarious, and the art direction of it with all the bright colors and interesting characters makes it that much better. If you didn't have a chance to see Thor Ragnarok because you didn't like the first two Thor movies, this one is completely different. And along with that, it also does have a lot more drama than the first two. It does have those serious moments as they're fighting Thor's sister Hela after she escapes hell. It is very interesting in the way that it tells that story as well. Most of the movie was improv, which is really cool. It sort of had a very bare bones script of what they knew they needed to get across, but not the exact dialogue for a lot of the scenes, so they let it be sort of this thing that was created while they were making it, which I think is such an interesting way to make a movie, and also really cool to see Marvel be willing to take that chance with something. The next film is one of Judd Apatow's first movies that's really blew up and also carried a lot of people with it, and that is The 40-Year-Old Virgin, the Steve Carell-led comedy about a man who works at a Best Buy-esque store who is a 40-year-old virgin, and all of his friends are really blown away at that fact. His friends include Paul Rudd and Seth Rogen, which is kind of crazy, and this whole movie is just a straight-up sort of raunchy adult comedy. It's a hard rated R film, and it just has a lot of really funny moments. And also, this movie came out a long enough time ago. This was sort of what skyrocketed Steve Carell's career. This and The Office in combination are what made him one of the biggest stars in Hollywood that he is today, and it's also one of the first roles for a lot of people that we now know and love, like I said, with Paul Rudd and Seth Rogen. And I think that this movie is really great, and it really holds up through the test of time, which I think is something that I have to give props to Judd Apatow for, because he's been able to do that with multiple films, not just this one. And I think it's very hard to make films that are sort of timeless, but I really think The 40-Year-Old Virgin is one where there are certain jokes that maybe are set because of the time period it takes place in, or there's things that you're like, oh, that's so weird that that's a thing that's in this movie. But overall, the general story and the comedy revolving around it is so good, and it's so quotable, and it's so funny that if you've never had the chance to see this movie, watch it, especially if you like films like Knocked Up and Superbad and things like that, because it definitely sort of falls into that same genre. If you enjoy the actors that are involved in it, watch it because it won't disappoint you. Wanted is the next film that I want to recommend, the Angelina Jolie, Morgan Freeman, James McAvoy film that stars a frustrated office worker who later finds out that he actually has assassin superpowers and joins this secret fraternity of assassins that are there to kill anyone that this weird knitting machine tells them to kill. It's a very interesting film. It's based on a graphic novel that's very popular, and I think this is a film that's sort of been forgotten in time. It's sort of disappointing because it actually has a lot of really cool visual effects and a lot of really awesome sort of storytelling in the way that it decides to show action, because action is the story in the film for the most part. It's also one of Chris Pratt's most forgotten films, which is something I feel like is hilarious when you watch it now, seeing how massive of a star Chris Pratt is. But I think that this movie is one that has been forgotten, which is disappointing. James McAvoy does a really good job. Angelina Jolie does a very good job. The story is actually interesting. It fulfills what you want a film based on a graphic novel to be. It's just silly enough that it's super interesting. So there are things where you're like, that's kind of dumb that that's in it, but it's being true to the comic when it does that. So the fact that you can shoot someone's bullets out of the air and make them collide, obviously that sounds ridiculous. But it's also kind of awesome the way that they show it in the movie, the way that they showcase these specific things, because it's not just a luck thing, it's that these characters have these abilities. And I think that's another thing that's forgotten about, is that these characters have a specific ability. They're not just regular people who can do this stuff. They are technically somewhat superhuman in some kind of way. It's a fun movie. It does have a little bit of comedy here and there, but mostly it's the action that's really good in it. The firefights are awesome. The car chases are really good. The sort of banter between the characters, James McAvoy being this guy who doesn't understand how he's in this scenario, it makes for a lot of really fun moments in the film. And if you haven't seen it, I'd recommend checking out if you like films that are kind of weird and quirky in the sense that their premise might be a little odd, but when you actually watch the film, it works in the movie that it's involved in. Michael Mann's Heat is the next movie that I want to recommend. This is arguably the greatest heist film that's ever existed. It is about a group of bank robbers who are being hunted down by a police officer played by Al Pacino. The bank robbers are Val Kilmer and Robert De Niro and a few other guys. This movie has, in my opinion, I think maybe the best firefight in film history. It takes place after a robbery and they're in the streets, and the way that they showcase it is amazing. And the other really interesting fact is, in that scene, the audio in it is very powerful. Like, the sound design in this film is amazing, but the fun thing about that is the gunshots aren't fake gunshots. They filled all the guns with blanks for that sequence, and they actually used the raw audio of that gunfire that's taking place in the scene in that specific sequence, and it really adds to sort of the visceral aspect of this film. And I think if you haven't seen it, definitely watch it if you like movies like The Town, or if you've played the game Grand Theft Auto 5, because the storyline in that game that revolves around the heists, one of those heists specifically is pretty solidly based on a heist from this film, which I think is really interesting. The movie has really awesome action. It also has an interesting story because it's about characters, both young and old, that are currently involved in this sort of lifestyle of being a career criminal, basically. and you get to see the different ways that they view life and how they view each other. And I think that that aspect of sort of criminality being humanized is a very interesting thing to put to film, and I think Michael Mann did a really wonderful job with it in this movie. The next movie on this list is another one that I feel like is kind of a forgotten film that's actually really, really good, and that's Blood Diamond, the Leonardo DiCaprio film about a former soldier, sort of mercenary, who finds a man whose son was taken in to become a child soldier when they discovered diamonds in his region by a warlord. And I think that the story of this is really good. At the time it came out, this movie became like a political movement in some places, which was really awesome to see, because Leonardo DiCaprio is obviously a very big, like, conservationist, and I think that in terms of this film, it's very fitting that he was in it. But besides that point, while the film's pacing is a little off, I would say at times, overall the performances and the story being told in this movie are extremely impressive. Specifically, DiCaprio gives, I think, maybe the most forgotten performance of his career, which is really disappointing. He does one of the hardest accents for Americans to do in this film, that being a South African accent, which is an extremely difficult accent, which is why you don't see a lot of Americans do it on film. And his performance is so heartwarming and so touching throughout the whole film. The ending of this movie is fantastic, and I think that if you enjoy films that really take a note to be somewhat political in their views and take note to talk about a current event, definitely watch this film, because it's still relevant today, which is really sad because this movie came out almost a decade ago. But I think that if you enjoy Leo, obviously watch it. But if you want a movie that actually has a real message that is about something real that's going on in the actual world that we exist in, this is a great movie to watch. Robert Rodriguez and Frank Miller's Sin City is the next movie that I want to recommend to you. The Bruce Willis, Benicio del Toro, Mickey Rourke, massive cast movie that this is. This is a film based on a graphic novel written by Frank Miller, and I think that this is one of the most accurate depictions of a graphic novel ever put to film, because the way the film is directed even includes the art style from the comics. The whole movie is black and white except for the color red, which is really, really interesting, and it makes for an absolutely beautiful movie. Visually, this film is stunning. Every single scene looks so good. It tells the story of this city that's just filled with crime and criminals. We follow multiple different storylines, from mob bosses to criminals themselves to ex-cops. There's a serial killer that's on the loose. There's all kinds of different things going on in this film, but the general story of it is about a man who's trying to save a young girl who he was trying to protect when he was a police officer, and that's Bruce Willis. And I think that story of the film alone really makes it feel like a human story, because based on the visuals and everything, you could say this film really loses its humanity in like how much it wants to feel like a comic book, but I think that that specific storyline humanizes the rest of the film as a whole. It has a really interesting performance by Elijah Wood that is sort of odd, and it's one of the first things he did post Lord of the Rings, which I think is kind of fun. And they made a sequel actually not that long ago for A Dame to Kill For, which was also a solid movie. That one sadly is being taken off of Netflix this month. But I do really enjoy Sin City. It's got some fun comedy. I love Mickey Rourke as an actor, and I think he does a great job in this film. And I think as a whole, the way that this film is able to showcase graphic novels put to film in such an accurate manner is very impressive. It's very visually stunning, and I think if anything you should watch this movie just for the visual aspect of it, but it does also have a very interesting story. I'm just kind of now noticing that I put a lot of really serious movies on my list this month, so the next movie to lighten it up a little bit is I Love You Man, the Jason Segel Paul Rudd film. Ironically, as I brought up Paul Rudd being in 40-Year-Old Virgin earlier, if you like Paul Rudd as an actor and you haven't seen I Love You Man, change that, because this movie is fantastic, especially if you're a dude. Watch this movie, because the accuracy at which it captures sort of male friendships and the different ways that we hang out and what we talk about is so good, because it captures it very accurately. And also, Jason Segel and Paul Rudd have such phenomenal chemistry on screen with one another. They make for so many really, really funny moments, and it's so good. The general plot is basically Paul Rudd is getting married, and he realizes that he doesn't really have any dude friends to be his best man or any of his groomsmen. So he's kind of struggling. So he meets Jason Segel's character at an open house that he's having, and then they sort of hang out once or twice, and then they become like best friends. And it's a very endearing film about their friendship, and I think that all the side characters are also amazing, because Rashida Jones plays Paul Rudd's wife, and then Jon Favreau plays one of their family friends, and Jon Favreau is so good in this movie. I love Jon Favreau. I feel like everyone makes jokes about Chef and stuff, but I like Chef as a movie. Come at me. I like Chef. It's a good, heartwarming family film about tasty food. But the man is extremely talented. He's both a very funny actor and a really, really skilled director, and he's super hilarious in this movie. The final film on my list this month is Train to Busan, a Korean zombie film that takes place on a train. As a zombie apocalypse basically breaks out in South Korea, these people enter a train, and each car is slowly sort of experiencing this virus, but they have to keep pushing through each cart. And it's a very well told story about a father and his daughter, and all he's trying to do is get his daughter to safety. That's his only goal in this scenario. He doesn't care about his safety or anyone else's. And that's a very big thing about his character in the film, is that he's sort of heartless in that sense. His daughter sort of has a warmer heart and is trying to help other people, but he's very much against that. It's all about him and his daughter surviving this thing. It's a very intense, suspense-filled film. If you say you can't handle subtitles, I'm gonna be honest, just watch the movie. It's a good enough story. You'll become invested even though you have to read subtitles to watch it. It's a lot of fun. It's got cool action. It's a very different take on a zombie apocalypse film, and I really enjoy that, because I think a lot of zombie movies sort of have fallen just into generic land of just dudes with guns shooting zombies, and, you know, maybe include a little bit of a human element, but this one's completely different because these people aren't armed. They're just on a train trying to go somewhere, and then this apocalypse starts and they have to sort of figure it out as they're on this train trying to escape these hordes of evil dead zombies that are trying to bite them. It's a fun movie. It's got cool action, a really heartwarming story that's very good, and just because it's subtitled, I don't want you to not give it a chance, because it is a very well-made film. Well guys, those are my picks for some movies that are going to be on Netflix in June of 2018 that I think are worth watching. If you like any of those movies, feel free to comment down below what you thought of them if you watch them from this list. As always, like everything we do here at Real Film Reviews, my name is Eric, and I hope to see you guys later.